I never thought I'd find love again at 50, especially not with a woman half my age, but life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them, and mine came in the form of Elaine. Thomas, the crisp autumn air nipped at my cheeks as I stepped out of my car parked in the lot of Boulder Women's Soccer Club. My first day as the new team doctor, and I was already running late. Damn traffic, I smoothed down my blazer, trying to look as professional as possible despite the flustered state I was in. As I hurried towards the main building, a flash of golden hair caught my eye. A tall, athletic woman was stretching her hamstrings near the entrance, her lean body moving with the grace of a dancer. Our eyes met for a brief moment, and I felt a jolt of electricity run through me. I quickly averted my gaze, chiding myself for acting like a schoolgirl with a crush. The team manager, a portly man named Bob, greeted me with a firm handshake. Dr. Miller, welcome aboard. We're thrilled to have someone of your caliber joining us. He led me through a whirlwind tour of the facilities, introducing me to staff members whose names I immediately forgot. My first patient of the day was none other than the blonde goddess I'd seen earlier, Elaine. Thomas, the team star forward, sat on the examination table, her legs swinging slightly up close. I could see the vibrant blue of her eyes like the Colorado sky on a clear day. So, Doc, are you going to fix me up? She flashed a cheeky grin that made my heart skip a beat. I cleared my throat, trying to maintain my professional demeanor. Let's start with a routine physical examination, shall we? Any ongoing issues I should know about? As I went through the motions of the exam, I couldn't help but notice the way Elaine's muscles rippled under her skin, the result of years of rigorous training. Her body was a work of art, and I found myself having to consciously focus on the task at hand. There's one thing, Elaine said, her voice suddenly softer. My right knee, it's been giving me trouble lately. I gently probed the area around her knee, feeling for any abnormalities. How long has this been going on? A few weeks, she admitted, biting her lower lip. I didn't want to say anything because, well, can't afford to be benched right now. The vulnerability in her voice caught me off guard. This wasn't just another athlete trying to push through the pain. There was real fear behind her words. I looked up, meeting her gaze, and for a moment the professional boundaries I'd built up over years of practice seemed to waver. Elaine, I said, my tone gentler than I'd intended, your long-term health is more important than any game. We need to run some tests, but I promise you we'll figure this out together. She nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Thanks, Doc. I feel better already knowing you've got my back. As she hopped off the table, her hand brushed against mine, and I felt that spark again. I watched her leave, my mind racing with thoughts I knew I shouldn't be having about a patient. Little did I know this was just the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything I thought I knew about love, professionalism, and myself. Boulder Women's Soccer Club was about to become the backdrop for a romance I never saw coming, one that would turn my carefully ordered world upside down. The weeks following my first encounter with Elaine were a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. I found myself looking forward to our appointments more than I cared to admit, even as I struggled to maintain a professional distance. Every time she walked into my office, all lean muscle and easy grace, I felt my resolve weaken just a little bit more. But I was Dr. Julian Miller, for crying out loud. I'd built my career on being level-headed and professional. I couldn't let some schoolgirl crush derail everything I'd worked for, so I buried myself in work, focusing on the other players and the myriad of responsibilities that came with being a team doctor. It was working too, or at least I thought it was, until the night everything changed. I was burning the midnight oil, poring over medical reports in my dimly lit office when a knock at the door startled me. Elaine stood in the doorway, her usually vibrant face etched with worry. Doc, we've got a problem, she said, her voice tight. Sarah twisted her ankle during practice. It looks bad. I sprang into action, grabbing my medical bag and following Elaine to the locker room. Sarah, the team's goalkeeper, sat on a bench, her face pale with pain as I examined her swollen ankle. I could feel the tension radiating from the gathered players. It's a severe sprain. I announced after a thorough check, need to stay off it for at least 2 weeks. The room erupted in a chorus of dismayed voices, their crucial match against. Denver was in 10 days, and losing Sarah was a significant blow. All right, everyone out. I ordered, needing space to work, except you, Elaine. I could use an extra pair of hands. As the room cleared, Elaine and I worked in tandem, wrapping Sarah's ankle and getting her comfortable. There was an easy rhythm to our movements, as if we'd been doing this together for years instead of weeks. You're good at this, I commented as we finished up. Elaine shrugged, a small smile playing on her lips. I've had my fair share of injuries, guess. I picked up a thing or two along the way. We ended up spending the next few hours strategizing ways to help the team cope with Sarah's absence. As the night wore on, our conversation drifted from professional concerns to more personal topics. I learned about Elaine's childhood in a small Midwestern town, her struggles coming out to her conservative parents, and her dreams beyond soccer. In turn, I found myself opening up about my own life, my failed marriage, my late-in-life realization about my sexuality, my fears of growing old alone. There was something about the quiet intimacy of the late hour that made it easy to share things I'd kept bottled up for years. As dawn broke, casting a soft glow through the office windows, I realized with a start how close we were sitting. Elaine's knee was brushing against mine, and I could smell the faint scent of her shampoo. Our eyes met, and for a moment the air between us crackled with unspoken tension. Elaine leaned in slightly, her gaze dropping to my lips. My heart raced, every fiber of my being screaming to close the distance between us, but at the last second reason prevailed. I cleared my throat and stood up abruptly, breaking the spell. We should get some rest, I said, my voice sounding strained even to my own ears. Big day tomorrow. Elaine blinked, looking momentarily confused before nodding. Right? Yeah, thanks for everything, Doc. As she left, I sank back into my chair, my head in my hands. What the hell was I thinking? She was my patient for Gosh's sake, not to mention the age difference. It was wrong on so many levels, but as I gathered my things to head home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had fundamentally shifted between us. The professional walls I'd so carefully constructed were starting to crumble, and I wasn't sure if I had the strength or even the desire to rebuild them. The drive home was a blur, my mind replaying every moment of the night as I crawled into bed, exhausted but unable to sleep. One thought kept circling in my head. I was in deep trouble, and I had no idea how to get out of it, or if I even wanted to. The invitation to speak at the sports medicine conference in Denver couldn't have come at a better time. I needed some distance from Boulder, from the team, and most importantly from Ain, a chance to clear my head and regain my professional perspective, or so I thought. As I stepped into the grand ballroom of the conference center, my eyes immediately locked onto a familiar blonde head in the crowd. Of course, the universe just couldn't give me a break. Elaine was here, looking stunning in a tailored suit that accentuated her athletic frame. She caught my gaze and waved a bright smile, lighting up her face. Fancy seeing you here, Doc, she said as I approached, her blue eyes twinkling with mischief. Didn't peg you for the conference type? I raised an eyebrow, trying to ignore the flutter in my stomach. I could say the same about you. Since when do soccer players attend medical conferences? She shrugged, a hint of pride in her voice. I'm presenting on the athlete's perspective of injury recovery. Turns out they wanted someone who's been on both sides of the exam table. We chatted for a few minutes, the conversation flowing easily despite my initial reservations. As we talked, I couldn't help but notice the way other attendees, particularly the younger doctors, were eyeing Elaine appreciatively. A pang of something that felt suspiciously like jealousy shot through me. The first day of the conference passed in a blur of lectures and networking. I managed to keep my interactions with Elaine professional, even as I found my eyes continually drawn to her across crowded rooms. It wasn't until the panel discussion on the second day that things got interesting. I was representing the medical perspective on long-term effects of repetitive injuries in professional athletes. Elaine, unsurprisingly, was there to give the player point of view. What I hadn't expected was the passion and intelligence with which she approached the topic. With all due respect, Dr. Miller, she said, her voice carrying across the packed auditorium. While the medical community's caution is understandable, it often fails to take into account the realities of professional sports. I felt my hackles rise, and those realities justify putting athletes' long-term health at risk, of course not, she countered, leaning forward in her seat. But there's a balance to be struck. We need doctors who understand and the pressure we're under, who can work with us to find solutions that protect our health without sidelining our careers. The debate grew heated, with Elaine and I trading points and counterpoints. The rest of the panel faded into the background as we went toe to toe, neither of us willing to back down. It was exhilarating, challenging, and oddly arousing. By the time the moderator called an end to the session, the tension between us was palpable. As we left the stage, Elaine leaned in close, her breath hot against my ear. Looks like we've got some things to discuss, Doc. Meet me at the hotel bar in an hour. I knew I should say no, but the fire in her eyes, the intellectual spark we'd shared during the debate, it was intoxicating. Fine. I heard myself say 1 hour. The hotel bar was dimly lit, the low hum of conversation providing a semblance of privacy. Elaine was already there when I arrived, 2 glasses of wine waiting on the table. That was quite a show we put on, she said, sliding a glass towards me. As I sat down, I took a sip, grateful for the liquid courage. You certainly know how to keep a girl on her toes. We rehashed the debate, our earlier antagonism melting into mutual respect and understanding. As the night wore on and the wine flowed freely, our conversation drifted to more personal topics. Can I ask you something, Elaine? Said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. Why did you become a doctor? The question caught me off guard. I found myself opening up about my childhood. Growing up with a chronically ill mother, the helplessness I felt watching her suffer, I guess. I wanted to be able to fix people. I admitted, to take away their pain. Elaine reached across the table, her hand covering mine, the touch sent sparks shooting up my arm. That's beautiful, Jillian, she said, using my first name for the first time. You're beautiful. The air between us grew thick with unspoken desire. I knew I should pull away, maintain that professional distance, but the wind, the intimacy of the moment, the way Elaine was looking at me, it all conspired to weaken my resolve. We leaned in simultaneously, our lips mere inches apart. I could feel her breath on my skin, could almost taste the wine on her lips. My heart pounded in my chest, every fiber of my being screaming to close that final distance. But at the last moment, a burst of laughter from a nearby table shattered the moment we pulled apart. The spell-broken reality came crashing back and bringing with it all the reasons why this was a terrible idea. I should go, I stammered, gathering my things. Early presentation tomorrow. Elaine nodded, disappointment evident in her eyes. Right, of course. As I hurried back to my room, my mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The professional in me was horrified at how close I'd come to crossing a line, but another part of me, a part I'd been trying desperately to ignore, was already regretting not seizing the moment. Sleep eluded me that night, my thoughts filled with what ifs, and May's one thing was clear: whatever was happening between Elaine and me, it wasn't going away, and sooner or later, I was going to have to face it head on. The weeks following the Denver conference were a delicate dance of stolen glances and carefully maintained professionalism. Elaine and I never spoke about that almost kiss in the hotel bar, but its ghost lingered between us, charging every interaction with unspoken tension. I was just starting to think I had a handle on things when disaster struck. It was a routine practice session. I was on the sidelines chatting with the assistant coach when I heard a cry of pain that made my blood run cold. Elaine was on the ground, clutching her right knee. The same one she complained about during our first meeting. I was at her side in an instant, my heart racing. Don't move, I instructed, gently probing the area around her knee. The swelling was already visible, and Elaine's face was contorted in agony. How bad is it, Doc? She asked through gritted teeth. I tried to keep my voice steady, professional. We won't know for sure until we get some scans, but it could be serious. We need to get you to the hospital. The next few hours were a blur of tests, scans, and anxious waiting. When the results finally came in, my worst fears were confirmed: a torn ACL. It was the kind of injury that could end careers, especially for players Ella's age. Breaking. The news to her was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. She sat there still in her hospital gown, looking smaller and more vulnerable than I'd ever seen her. So that's it. Then she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "It's over." Not necessarily, I replied, sitting next to her on the bed. With surgery and intensive rehabilitation, there's a chance you could play again. It won't be easy, but if anyone can do it, it's you. She looked at me then, her blue eyes shimmering with unshed tears. You really believe that I do, I said, and without thinking, I reached out and took her hand in mine. And I'll be with you every step of the way. The moment the words left my mouth, I knew I'd crossed a line. But seeing her like this, all her usual bravado stripped away, awakened something fiercely protective in me. Professional boundaries be damned. Ella's fingers tightened around mine, and for a long moment, we just sat there in silence, drawing strength from each other. The next few weeks were intense. Elaine threw herself into her recovery with the same determination she showed on the field. I found myself spending more and more time with her, monitoring her progress, adjusting her treatment plan. And if I'm being honest, simply being there for her. It was during one of our late-night physical therapy sessions that things came to a head. Elaine was pushing herself hard, maybe too hard. I could see the pain etched on her face as she struggled through another set of exercises. "That's enough for today," I said, moving to help her up. "No," she growled, frustration clear in her voice. "I can do more. I have to do more." "Elaine, stop," I said, firmly grabbing her shoulders. "You're going to hurt yourself." She looked up at me, her eyes blazing with a mixture of anger, fear, and something else I couldn't quite name. "Why do you care so much?" she demanded. "I'm just another patient, right?" The words hit me like a physical blow, because she wasn't just another patient. She hadn't been for a long time. Before I could formulate a response, the door to the physical therapy room burst open. A tall, elegant woman with graying hair strode in her eyes, locking onto me with laser-like focus. "Hello, Jillian," she said, her voice cool and measured. It's been a while. I felt the blood drain from my face. "Mar, what are you doing here?" Elaine looked between us, confusion evident on her face. "Doc, who's this?" I swallowed hard, my mouth suddenly dry. "Elaine, this is Margaret." My ex-wife. The silence that followed was deafening. Margaret's eyes narrowed as she took in the scene before her, me still holding Elaine's shoulders, our faces inches apart. "I can see you're busy," Margaret said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "We'll catch up later, shall we?" As she turned to leave, I felt panic rising in my chest. This was exactly the kind of complication I didn't need right now. "Margaret, wait," but she was already gone, the door swinging shut behind her with a definitive click. I turned back to Elaine, my mind reeling. Her face was a mask of conflicting emotions: surprise, hurt, and something that looked suspiciously like jealousy. "I think," she said slowly, "you have some explaining to do." I nodded, sinking into a nearby chair. "Yeah, I guess I do." As I began to unravel the complicated history of my marriage and subsequent divorce, I could feel the carefully constructed walls between us crumbling. This wasn't doctor and patient anymore. This was just two women with all their flaws and baggage, trying to navigate the murky waters of attraction and professional ethics. By the time I finished my story, we were both emotionally exhausted. Elaine reached out her hand and cupping my cheek gently. "Thank you for telling me," she said softly, and then before I could talk myself out of it, I leaned in and kissed her. It was soft and tentative at first, but quickly deepened into something more passionate. More desperate years of pent-up longing and denied attraction poured into that kiss. When we finally broke apart, both breathless, I knew there was no going back. Whatever happened next, things between us had irrevocably changed, so Elaine said, a small smile playing on her lips. What now, Doc? I laughed, a slightly hysterical edge to it. I have absolutely no idea. As I left the clinic that night, my head spinning with the events of the day. One thing was clear, my life had just gotten a whole lot more complicated, and I wasn't entirely sure I minded the weeks following that. Fateful kiss were a whirlwind of stolen moments and secret smiles, Elaine, and I had tried to keep things professional during her therapy sessions, but the air between us crackled with unspoken desire. Every touch, every glance was charged with meaning. But along with the thrill of new love came the gnawing anxiety of discovery. The team was a hotbed of gossip at the best of times, and I knew our budding relationship wouldn't stay secret for long. It started with whispers in the locker room sidelong. Glances when Elaine and I were together. I tried to ignore it to focus on my work, but the weight of scrutiny was constant. One afternoon, as I was reviewing some files in my office, Sarah, the goalkeeper, knocked on my door. "Hey, Doc," she said, an odd look on her face. "Can we talk?" I nodded, gesturing for her to take a seat. "Of course. How's the ankle?" "It's fine," she said, waving off my concerned look. "I'm just going to come out and say it. What's going on with you?" And Elaine, I felt my heart rate spike, but I kept my face neutral. "I'm not sure what you mean. I'm her doctor, that's all." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Come on, Doc, we're not blind. The way you two look at each other, it's not exactly subtle." I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. "Sarah, I appreciate your concern, but my personal life is my own business." Maybe she conceded, but when it affects the team, it becomes our business too. People are talking. Doc, and not everyone is as understanding as me. As she left, I slumped in my chair, the weight of our secret suddenly feeling unbearable. I knew we needed to be more careful, but the thought of pulling away from Elaine made my chest ache. That night, during one of our clandestine therapy sessions, I broached the subject with Elaine. "People are starting to notice," I said, my hands working the muscles of her recovering me. "We need to be more discreet." Elaine's face fell. "Are you having second thoughts?" "No," I said quickly, squeezing her hand. "God, no, I'm worried about the consequences for both of us." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "So what do we do?" I didn't have an answer. Instead, I leaned in and kissed her soft and sweet. It was meant to be reassuring, but it quickly deepened into something more heated. Before I knew it, Elaine had pulled me onto the therapy table with her, our bodies pressed together. "Elaine," I gasped, trying to maintain some semblance of control. "We can't not hear," but her hands were already sliding under my shirt, her touch setting my skin on fire. "Why not?" she murmured against my neck. "No one's here. It's just us." I knew I should stop, that this was beyond unprofessional, but the feel of her body against mine, the way she looked at me with such unbridled desire, my resolve crumbled. What followed was a frenzy of hands and lips closed, hastily discarded. We moved together with an urgency born of weeks of pent-up longing. I marveled at the strength of her athlete's body, the softness of her skin. When we finally came together, it was with a passion that left us both breathless and trembling afterward. As we lay tangled together on the therapy table, reality began to seep back in. I muttered, the full weight of what we'd done hitting me. Elaine propped herself up on an elbow, concern etched on her face. "Jillian, are you okay?" I sat up, running a hand through my disheveled hair. "We shouldn't have done that, not here. If anyone had walked in, but they didn't." Elaine set her hand on my back, tracing soothing circles. "It's okay. We're okay." I wanted to believe her, but the gnawing worry in my gut wouldn't subside. This wasn't just about us anymore. If word got out, it could derail both our careers. As we dressed in silence, the air between us thick with unspoken concerns, I made a decision. We need to cool things off. I said, "Not me," in her eyes, "just for a while, until the gossip dies." Down Elaine's face fell, but she nodded. "If that's what you think is best." We left separately that night, the joy of our intimate encounter overshadowed by the weight of our secret. As I drove home, my mind raced with possibilities, each more disastrous than the last. What if the team found out? What if the medical board got wind of our relationship? I could lose my license, my career, everything I'd worked so hard for. But even as these fears swirled in my head, I couldn't bring myself to regret what had happened, the memory of Elaine's touch, the sound of her gasps of pleasure. The way she'd looked at me with such raw emotion, it was all seared into my brain. I knew then that no matter what happened, no matter the consequences, I was in too deep to turn back now. Elaine had become as essential to me as breathing, and the thought of giving her up was more painful than any potential fallout. As I crawled into bed that night, exhausted and afflicted, I made a silent promise to myself and to Elaine. We would find a way to make this work. We had to, because the alternative, a life without her, was simply unthinkable. Little did I know the real challenges were only just beginning. The next few weeks were an exercise in restraint, a layman. I maintained a professional facade during her therapy sessions, but the tension between us was palpable. Every accidental brush of skin sent electricity coursing through my body, and I caught her watching me with a hunger that made my knees weak, but it wasn't just our physical attraction that was difficult to ignore. The more time we spent together, the more I found myself falling for her mind, her determination. Her quick-witted conversations during therapy sessions became the highlight of my day, ranging from heated debates about sports medicine to quiet discussions about our hopes and fears. One evening, as I was packing up to leave, Elaine cornered me in my office. "This is killing me, Jillian," she said, her voice low and intense. "I can't keep pretending there's nothing between us," I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I know, believe me, I know, but what choice do we have? The age difference alone? I don't give a damn about the age difference," Elaine interrupted, "and neither should you. We both adults. It's not just that I argued I'm your doctor. There are ethical considerations, professional standards." "Then stop being my doctor," she said simply. "There are other team physicians. Let someone else handle my case." The suggestion took me aback. I hadn't even considered that as an option. I don't know, Elaine, your recovery is crucial. I'm not sure I trust anyone else to what care about me as much as you do. She stepped closer, her blue eyes intense. "That's exactly why you should step back. You're too close to this to me." She had a point, and I knew it, but the thought of not being directly involved in her recovery, of not having those moments together, made my chest ache. "I'll think about it," I promised. Before I could say more, there was a knock at my office door. We sprang apart guiltily as Bob, the team manager, poked his head in. "Oh, good, you're both here," he said, oblivious to the tension in the room. "Elaine, your agent called. Apparently some of your sponsors are getting antsy about your recovery timeline. They want to schedule a press conference to discuss your progress and future with the team." Elaine's face paled. "A press conference? But I'm nowhere near ready to." I know," Bob interrupted, "but these big wigs are breathing down my neck. We need to give them something, even if it's just a show of confidence. Dr. Miller, I'll need you there too, to give a medical perspective." After Bob left, Elaine slumped into a chair. She muttered, "This is the last thing I need right now." I knelt beside her, professional boundaries momentarily forgotten. "Hey, it'll be okay. We'll figure this out together." She looked at me, vulnerability clear in her eyes. "Promise, promise," I said, squeezing her hand. The day of the press conference arrived all too quickly. I stood off to the side of the makeshift stage, watching as Elaine fielded questions with practiced ease. She looked stunning in a tailored suit, her blonde hair swept back in a professional updo. It was a far cry from the sweaty, determined athlete I was used to seeing in therapy sessions. When it was my turn to speak, I kept things clinical and optimistic. "Well, Miss Thomas's injury was severe. Her recovery is progressing well with continued dedication to her rehabilitation program. We're hopeful she'll make a full return to the field." As I stepped back, a reporter in the front row raised his hand. "Dr. Miller, there have been rumors circulating about the nature of your relationship with Miss Thomas. Care to comment?" The room fell silent. I felt my heart stop, then start racing out. Of the corner of my eye, I saw Elaine tense up. I'm not sure what you're implying. I said, fighting to keep my voice steady, my relationship with Miss. Thomas is strictly professional, as it is with all my patients. The reporter opened his mouth to ask a follow-up, but Bob quickly stepped in, ending the press conference as we filed off the stage. I could feel the weight of suspicious glances following us back in the privacy of my office. Elaine and I stared at each other, the reality of our situation crashing down around us. That was too close. I said, my voice shaky. If they start digging, then let them. Elaine said fiercely, I'm tired of hiding, Jillian. I'm tired of pretending I'm not in love with you. Her words hit me like a physical force. Love. We hadn't said it before, not out loud, but hearing it now in the wake of our near exposure, it felt both terrifying and exhilarating. Elaine, I breathed, stepping closer to her. I love you too, but this says it could ruin everything. Your career, my career. I don't care, she interrupted, closing the distance between us. None of that matters. If I can't be with you. And then she was kissing me hard and desperate. I kissed her back with equal fervor, all my fears and doubts melting away in the heat of her embrace. For a moment, nothing else existed but the two of us wrapped up in each other. When we finally broke apart, breathless and disheveled, reality came crashing back in. What are we going to do? I asked, resting my forehead against hers. Elaine took a deep breath. We're going to face this hidden. No more hiding, no more secrets. Whatever comes, we'll deal with it together. As I looked into her determined blue eyes, I felt a surge of courage. She was right. We've been running from this for too long. It was time to stand our ground and fight for what we had together. I agreed, sealing the promise with another kiss as we left the office that night, hand in hand. I knew we were stepping into uncharted territory. The road ahead would be challenging, filled with obstacles and judgment, but with Elaine by my side, I felt ready to face whatever came our way. Little did I know our biggest challenge was just around the corner. The aftermath of our decision to go public with our relationship was like a tornado tearing through our carefully constructed lives. The team was in uproar. Sponsors were threatening to pull out, and my inbox was flooded with emails from the medical board demanding explanations. I sat in my office staring at my resignation letter. It felt like the only way to protect Elaine's career. If I removed myself from the equation, maybe the storm would die down, but every time I reached for the mouse to send it, I hesitated. A knock on my door interrupted my internal struggle. It was Dr. Andrew Peterson, the team's orthopedic specialist. His face was grim as he entered. Jillian, we need to talk, he said, closing the door behind him. I braced myself. Andrew, I can explain. He held up a hand, cutting me off. Save it. I'm not here for explanations. I'm here to warn you. My stomach dropped. Warn me. Andrew sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. The board is considering an ethics investigation. If they find evidence of misconduct, you could lose your license. The words hit me like a physical blow. Lose my license. The thought was almost unbearable. Medicine wasn't just my career. It was my identity, my purpose. What should I do? I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. Andrew's eyes softened slightly. If I were you, I'd end things with Ain publicly. It might be enough to satisfy the board for a moment. I considered it. It would be the sensible thing to do, the safe option. But then I thought of Elaine's smile, her determination, the way she looked at me like I was the only person in the world. Could I really give that up? I can't, I said, surprised by the firmness in my voice. I won't. Andrew shook his head, disappointment clear on his face. Then I hope she's worth it. After he left, I sat in stunned silence, the weight of his warning pressing down on me. Everything I'd worked for was hanging by a thread. And for what, a relationship that was barely a few months old. But even as doubt crept in, I knew in my heart that Elaine was worth it, worth everything. I was so lost in thought that I didn't hear the door open again. It wasn't until I felt a familiar hand on my shoulder that I looked up to see Elaine standing there, concern etched on her beautiful face. Hey, she said softly, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. I managed a weak smile, just processing some things. How about you? How are you holding up with all this? Elaine shrugged, perching on the edge of my desk. It's been tough. My agent's having a field day trying to do damage control. But honestly, I'm more worried about you. I reached for her hand, intertwining our fingers. Elaine, I need to tell you something. And so I did, laying out everything Andrew had told me, the risks to my career, the potential consequences. As I spoke, I watched her face carefully, looking for any sign of doubt or regret, but all I saw was a steely determination that I'd come to associate with her when I finished. Elaine was quiet for a long moment, then to my surprise, she started to laugh. "What's so funny?" I asked, bewildered. She shook her head, a wry smile on her lips. "Just thinking about how ridiculous this all is, two grown women being treated like criminals for falling in love. It's absurd." Her laughter was contagious, and soon I found myself chuckling along with her. It felt good to laugh, to release some of the tension that had been building up. As our laughter subsided, Elaine's expression turned serious. "Jillian, I need you to know something. If this gets to be too much, if you want to walk away, I'll understand. I don't want to be the reason you lose everything you've worked for." I felt my heart swell with emotion here. She was offering me an out, even though I knew it would break her heart in that moment. I knew with absolute certainty that I'd made the right choice. "Not a chance," I said, pulling her close. "You're stuck with me, Thomas, for better or worse." She grinned, relief evident in her eyes. "Good, because I've got an idea." Elaine's plan was bold, bordering on reckless. Instead of hiding or apologizing, we would confront the issue hidden. She wanted to hold a press conference, lay out our story on our own terms before the rumor mill could spin it out of control. "It's risky," I said, mulling it over. "If it backfires, then at least." We went down fighting. Elaine finished together. I nodded, a plan already forming in my mind. "Okay, but if we're doing this, we're doing it right." I have some calls to make the next few days. We're a whirlwind of preparation. We reached out to LGBTQ+ advocacy groups, lined up supportive teammates and colleagues to speak on our behalf, and crafted our message carefully the night before the press conference. Elaine surprised me with a suggestion. "Let's get out of here," she said, a mischievous glint in her eye. "Just for tonight. I know a place." Despite my protests about needing to prepare, she managed to convince me. We drove for hours, winding up mountain roads, until we reached a secluded cabin with a breathtaking view of the Rockies. As we stood on the balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Whatever happened tomorrow, we had this moment. Elaine wrapped her arms around me from behind, resting her chin on my shoulder. "Penny, for your thoughts, Doc." I leaned back into her embrace, savoring the warmth of her body against mine, just thinking about how lucky I am. Despite everything, I wouldn't change a thing. She turned me around to face her, her blue eyes intense in the fading light. Neither would I. Our kiss was soft and sweet, full of promise and shared strength. As it deepened, I felt the last of my doubts melt away. This was right. This was worth fighting for. That night, as we made love under the stars, I knew that whatever challenges tomorrow brought, we would face them together, and somehow that made everything else seem manageable. As I drifted off to sleep in Elaine's arms, I felt more certain than ever that we were on the right path. Tomorrow would be a battle, but it was one we were ready to face side by side, hand in hand. We would tell our truth to the world, and maybe, just maybe, love would win out in the music end. The day of reckoning arrived with a crisp autumn chill in the air. Elaine and I stood backstage at the Boulder Women's Soccer Club, our hands clasped tightly together as we listened to the buzz of the gathered media outside. "Ready for this?" Elaine asked, her voice steady despite the gravity of the moment. I took a deep breath, drawing strength from her presence as I'll ever be. As we stepped out onto the makeshift stage, the flashes of cameras nearly blinded me. The faces of reporters, team officials, and medical board representatives blurred together in a sea of anticipation and judgment. I cleared my throat, my prepared statement, feeling inadequate in the face of such scrutiny. "Thank you all for coming. We've called this press conference to address the rumors and speculations Surrounding my relationship with Elaine Thomas, the room fell silent. Hanging on my every word, I felt Elaine's hand squeeze mine, urging me on. Yes, Elaine and I are in a relationship. I continued, my voice growing stronger. It developed after her injury, during her recovery process. We understand the ethical concerns this raises, and we're here to address them openly and honestly. What followed was a barrage of questions, some probing, some accusatory. We fielded them as best we could, emphasizing that our relationship never compromised Ella's medical care or my professional judgment. Just as I thought we might be making headway, a voice cut through the crowd. Dr. Miller, how do you respond to allegations that you've engaged in similar relationships with other patients in the past? My blood ran cold. I turned to see Dr. Peterson, the orthopedic specialist, who had warned me, standing at the back of the room with a smug expression. Before I could formulate a response, Elaine stepped forward. That's absurd, she said, her voice ringing with conviction. Dr. Miller is the most ethical, professional person. I know this relationship is as much of a surprise to her as it is to everyone else. I felt a surge of gratitude for her unwavering support, but the damage was done. The room erupted into chaos, reporters shouting questions faster than we could answer them. Just when I thought all hope was lost, an unexpected voice cut through the den. That's enough. The crowd parted to reveal Margaret, my ex-wife, striding towards the stage. My heart sank. This was it, the final nail in my coffin. But to my utter astonishment, Margaret took the microphone and addressed the room. I've known Jillian Miller for over 20 years, both as her wife and as a colleague in the medical field. In all that time, I've never known her to act unprofessionally or unethically. Our marriage ended for many reasons, but Jillian's integrity was never one of them. The room fell silent, everyone too shocked by this turn of events to speak. Margaret turned to me, a soft smile on her face. You deserve to be happy, Jill, both of you do. As she stepped back, I felt tears pricking at my eyes. It was the last thing I had expected, but somehow it was exactly what we needed. The tide of public opinion began to shift. Other colleagues stepped forward, vouching for my character and professionalism. Even some of Elaine's teammates spoke up, describing how our relationship had never interfered with team dynamics. As the press conference wound down, I felt a glimmer of hope. We weren't out of the woods yet, but we had made our case, and people were listening. Weeks passed, and slowly life began to return to normal. The medical board, after a thorough investigation, issued a formal reprimand, but allowed me to keep my license. The team, well, initially we came to accept our relationship as they saw how it positively impacted Ella's recovery. One crisp winter morning, as Elaine and I walked hand-in-hand through a snow-covered park, she turned to me with a mischievous grin. So, Dr. Miller, now that the dust has settled, what's next for us? I pretended to consider for a moment. Well, I was thinking, how do you feel about Boston? Ella's eyebrows shot up. Boston? What's in Boston? A fresh start, I said, my heart racing with excitement. I've been offered a position at a sports medicine clinic there. It's a chance to rebuild my career away from all this drama. And I paused, suddenly nervous. I was hoping you might come with me for a moment. Elaine was silent, and I feared I'd overstepped, but then her face broke into a radiant smile. Jillian Miller, are you asking me to move in with you? I nodded, feeling a blush creep up my cheeks. I know it's fast, but after everything we've been through, life's too short to waste time, you know. Elaine responded by pulling me into a deep, passionate kiss that left me breathless. When we finally broke apart, she rested her forehead against mine. Yes, she whispered 1,000 times. Yes, as we continued our walk, planning our new life together. I marveled at the journey that had brought us here, from doctor and patient to lovers, from scandal to acceptance. We had weathered it all. Months later, as we unpacked boxes in our new Boston apartment, I caught Elaine staring at with a soft expression. What? I asked, feeling self-conscious. She shook her head, smiling, just thinking about how lucky I am, you know, when I first got injured. I thought my life was over, but now she gestured around the apartment of the life we were building together now. I realize it was just beginning. I crossed the room and pulled her into my arms, overwhelmed with love and gratitude. I know exactly what you mean as we stood there wrapped in each other's embrace. I knew that whatever challenges the future held, we would face. Them together, our love story may have had an unconventional start, but it was ours and it was beautiful. And really, in the end, isn't that what matters most?